Not a bad little hidey hole to spend the night, and there is plenty of water back here. I heard another group come by while I was drinking coffee about an hour and a half ago. From what I've heard, a lot of people are planning to switch to earlier morning, later evening, and are counting on getting more miles than me. Don't get me wrong, based on yesterday, I think I could make bigger miles, but I have been hit by enough issues lately. I'm not going to count on that. So instead, I have enough food to make it through with about my 22 to 24 mile normal day. And if I can do more, I will do more. As far as water capacity, this is basically what I got. This is a 1 liter smart water bottle. This is a 1.5 liter smart water bottle, and that is a 2 liter CNOC. The smart water bottles are clean, aka I only put filtered water in there. And the CNOC is my dirty water carry and what I filter out of. So that means I can carry about a little over a gallon, which is good for a day and change if I have to really scrimp. If I need more capacity than this, I can always pick up like an additional bottle or something. I have thought about switching to a 3 liter CNOC, but that's honestly more just for end of the day, because sometimes when I filter and then I get in the tent, I don't want to get back out of the tent to have to filter. This site was vastly underrated in the comments. But the only downside is trying to find a patch of grass that hasn't been cow splatted all over. So obviously the next couple hundred miles through the Great Divide Basin, pretty much to the Colorado border, I think, is going to be all about water carries. So for me, at the moment, anything under 15 miles, I don't worry about that much. If I have to go 15 miles, I'm probably going to fill my 1.5 liter and my 1 liter bottle fully, but that's not going to be that big of a deal, especially in terrain like this where I can probably hike 3+ miles an hour if I'm on, dirt roads, things like that. Going through sage is a little slower. This morning I have about a 10 mile, and I filled the little bottle, so that's 1 liter and about half of my 1.5, so call it 1 3/4 liter or so. I could run with less. I tend to be a little bit cautious just because I really, really hate running out of water. I have notably had that happen a couple of times and gotten so bad to the point where, my tongue was swelling up, and it's usually worth the extra weight just to have a little bit as a backup. I'm also funny in that I never want to completely finish off my water. So I'll almost always have like at least 1/4 liter with me when I get to the next source. And that tends to be influenced by whatever's happened to me recently. I did get during some of the mountainous sections back there where I was basically carrying no water. And then every time I get to a fill up spot, I would filter 1.5 liters and drink that. And that would get me another, 7-8 miles down the trail. The good news out here is, per the weather forecast, it's only supposed to get up into the high 70s. Hence why I'm not screwing around and worrying about hiking super early or super late. I have seen a lot of people around me commenting that that's what they're going to do. Quite frankly, I really like my normal routine. I'm enjoying the episodes of Better Call Saul I'm watching in the evening. I like my morning ritual of coffee and editing videos, and it's just not worth disrupting that. I'm out here to enjoy the through hike. When I did the PCT, I just didn't start till May 4th back in 2020, so I had some pretty significant heat waves, and there I had to adjust. If it got into, mid 90s at that point, okay, yeah, hike in the morning, hike in the evening, try and find a place to hide middle of the day. I have seen people talking about the PCT desert section and midday siesta, representing it as that's just, the way you do it. And as with a lot of the tips and tricks I hear spread around, it's extra complication when you can make it a lot simpler and just kind of keep going as long as you hydrate and, you have the right gear. So once I finished my video edits and first cup of coffee this morning, and I was ready to deal with the reality of having to hike, I spent a good amount of time basically walking through the waypoints and far out up ahead. one of the quirks of Far Out is if you look, you haven't used the app before, you see the little water icon, and you're like, oh, that's all the water. And then you start looking and some of them will say they're dry, and all of a sudden you could kind of think you might have an issue. Instead, there are off-trail water sources that never get a waypoint. The data on a lot of these guides is managed by an outside organization, and those do varying degrees of a good or bad job maintaining all the data. And as I mentioned before, the CDT does not have the most reliable waypoint data. So there are waypoints up ahead that are marked as like a cow gate, which have a water cache. And the only way you can find that out is you have to scroll through each of them and see somebody mentioned in the comments, oh, there's a water cache. In addition, like in the Idaho section, for example, there are often off-trail cattle troughs, springs and things that were not marked as water, so you just have to look at all the junctions, things like that. It'll tell you, oh yeah, 0.4 down the hill. Just look for the wood logs, and there is water. I keep a little notepad list that marks basically the mileages I want to remember, because it's a pain in the ass to have to look things up in Far Out every single time, and I don't remember things out here when I'm always exhausted. So for sections like this where I have to pay attention to the water, I start marking each of the water sources that I know I need to hit. Because sometimes, like for example here, this is the last water for 8.5 miles. So I make a note about this. I note the water in 8.5 miles. Note how easy that Far Out makes this. For example, on the Condor Trail, I was often doing long carries and I had no idea if I was going to be able to find water on the other side. And a couple of times I was quite thirsty as I was running around cow fields looking for mossy patches, which might indicate that if I bushwhack a half mile uphill, maybe there would be collectible water. Interestingly enough, prior to Far Out / Gut Hooks coming on the scene, there were things like on the PCT, which is the one I'm more familiar with, there used to be a water report maintained through this website. It was basically a spreadsheet that people could send in reports on, and they would keep that spreadsheet updated, and you could download copies of it. Obviously, once Far Out came along, that removed a lot of steps and made it a lot easier. Of course, one of the quirks of the system is not everybody has the same standards as far as water. As long as it doesn't taste too nasty like Home Stank Lake did, I'll drink pretty much anything. When you filter it, you're not going to get Giardia or Cryptosporidia. I'm not that worried about viruses on continental US, so not that big a deal. Some people, if there are cows within a mile, freak out and don't want to, filter out of a trough or a pond. And I will admit, on the PCT up in Oregon, desert water sources I didn't have any sort of an issue with. In Oregon, there were a lot of these little puddles, and you'd come up and somebody was letting their dirty dog swim around in this little pond or bathing in it themselves. And then you're like, dude, that is the only water source for 10 miles back here. But what you gonna do? In particular out here, I've noticed a lot of people making comments about XYZ water source not being collectible. And obviously they don't know the old ziploc trick where you use a ziploc or a C-knock and you can scoop things out of a little puddle. Man, that is one well-protected sign there. Interesting. Hard copy of the CDT water carry. Some of these I know may be dry, but for example, today I'm going from Sweetwater River to Upper Mormon to Weasel, and then we'll see past that. Interestingly enough, all of the comments from last month talk about how bad the mosquitoes are. People talk about not being able to get water without having to sacrifice a bunch of blood. I have to say, other than a few cases like Glacier and a few isolated areas of Yellowstone, the bug situation has actually treated me pretty good. Another score for the whole SOBO versus NOBO thing. On the plus side, I get a nice break from having to check the map every 2 minutes. I'm always highly interested in these random signs out here that denote this trail or that. When I have internet, I tend to look them up and see, because there are some kind of like long lost abandoned trails. Like there is something called the Desert Trail, which goes from basically Ocotillo east of Campo all the way up into Idaho and hits the Canadian border. It doesn't overlap the PCT. It goes through Joshua Tree and everything. If you look back on my blog pre-PCT, I actually did about 5 days on it, up to, or less than that. I just went up to Borrego Springs as a warm-up. And as somebody who doesn't have the temperament to just do like 5 laps on the PCT or anything, I'm always interested in new and interesting trails. So every time Far Out sends out an email saying, we've just added a new trail and it's something I haven't heard of, I'm always like, oh, I want to go do that. And then somewhere Taters sighs and rolls her eyes. As hard as the Condor Trail was in multiple ways, I had a ton of fun doing that. And there are a whole lot more, assuming we can kind of manage the economic and life circumstances to keep me hiking here. There's a lot of others like that I would like to do. So here's another one of those water sources that people were saying skip on Far Out. Perfectly reasonable. Mountains. That's looking back the way I came. At least I have more to look forward to in Colorado, right? It's kind of sad I don't have the Horse with No Name song on my phone. So this is the direction that I am hiking. Then I look over here and it's like, what the hell, clouds? Why are y'all all the way over there? All I want is partially cloudy. Or fully cloudy. Fully cloudy would be good. Oh my God, shade. Oh, nice clouds. Bring lots of friends. I could basically see it coming across the floor at me and stop so I wouldn't outrun it. And after about 10 easy miles, that patch of green up ahead is Mormon Spring. Well, that was a duck that was easy to find. So the usual issues with cow patties in the area, but this will work. 10 miles down, 5 and change to the next one. Kind of feel like I'm hiking too fast, outrunning the clouds here. And more cows. This is basically the first time I found shade all day. Cows and horses hanging together. And this is supposed to be the water cache. Thought that might have been the cache maintainer, but just somebody who's out here hiking. Apparently this cache is maintained by a Mormon group. So it's currently 7 o'clock. I now have a lot of water on my back. There is one source that is closer than the 20-mile spring. That may be a little cow-fouled. I basically filled up my 2.5 liter bottles, and I have about 1.5 liters in the CNOC. So I'm gonna hopefully do about another 5 miles tonight. This morning felt like easy miles, but I'm up above 25 miles at this point, and just a bit tired. Unfortunately, the ground out here isn't the best, but I think I'm done for the night. Okay, 9 p.m. I'm basically on the top of a little mountain here. I was gonna go forward till I found grass, but it's getting late and I'm ready to stop, so home sweet home for the night.